Hey, assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to another MPL episode. Today we're joined by two amazing guests, Khalid and Asiya. Before we get into it, I just want to open up the floor to them so they can quickly introduce themselves.
Okay, I'll start off. Hey guys, my name is Khalid. I'm currently a second year student at the University of Waterloo and I study computer engineering.
Awesome.
Nice to meet you all. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Asiya. I am, quite finished my degree. And so a Western alumni, essentially, but starting another degree soon, inshallah. I used to be a part of the MSA. I don't know what else to describe. Like, I always get these like moments where I'm like, who am I really? And yeah, so that's it. I work full-time as a political staffer for a member of parliament here in London, Ontario. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to dive straight into it. So, this episode is going to be centered around trying to navigate that sort of young adult Muslim identity because this is the time where you kind of are confronted with a lot of situations, and it's one of those times where it's either make or break. So, we wanted to start off by asking when was the first time where you were actually confronted with some sort of situation where you had to kind of battle between your different identities, or when was the first time that reality actually hit?
Okay, that's actually a good question. So the thing about me is I've been in Islamic school since grade 7, I want to say. Then the same for you, Faizan, right?
Six, yeah.
Yeah, so we've been in Islamic schools like from a young age. And then for university, so you're forced in Islamic school, you have to be a misbehaving Muslim, at least at school. And then for university, I ended up moving away from my parents and living not with my friends, living with strangers that I don't know, sometimes even non-Muslims. So there was like a stark difference in the surroundings I was in, you know? And so you have to actually start questioning like, okay, which identity are you going to be now? Like, was I really only a Muslim because I was in Islamic school, or am I going to be just as religious or more religious now that I have a lot more freedom to not be so, you know? So I'd say graduating high school, moving out, and just the entirety like university so far for me.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really, there are some instances, but I feel like, alhamdulillah, like I've been very steadfast in my identity and who I am, to not have been so intimidated either by my surroundings or like peer pressure and things like that. So, I did attend like a non-Islamic school all throughout my life. I did go to Sunday school and things like that. But even then, a lot of the friends that I had, I was like lucky enough to have some really great Muslim friends who I was able to connect very quickly with and do literally like a lot of things with. And in that way, we grew spiritually. So every Ramadan, we'd be together. We'd go to Taraweeh together. We'd, like everything you could possibly think of. I did like religiously, Islamically. I had a great support system, and that was my friends, right? And if I didn't have them, I think I would definitely have fallen into, you know, I don't know, like questioning my identity more. But because I had them, I was able to have that solid, base. Yeah, and I think the one time that I did experience those things was going into university and getting involved with whether it was clubs, whether it was different like networking groups or whatnot that were non-Muslim, and then that's when I began to find myself in places where there was a lot of drinking for networking or whatnot, or like even work events, right? So when you go to work events, like you'll find yourself being in that atmosphere a lot, and that's just like what they deem to be professional,
Yeah.
even though I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and like for example, if you have a client facing job, your entire career is based off of like impressing your client, taking your client out for drinks, like taking your client out for dinner, whatever. So that's where I could see, a lot of young professionals essentially getting tempted to do things that they normally wouldn't do to impress people, whether it's for work or networking or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Especially this year when IB started, like that sort of hit me, and I was very unexpected. So, I think a lot of us will go a little bit more in detail with respect to our experiences. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, the first time I sort of realized that okay, this was going to be a challenge was so I lived in the Middle East growing up, and in the Middle East, like praying on time was never an issue when you were out in public because there were like mosques like everywhere. There were mosques even like within the malls, right? So when I came here and I moved to like Mississauga, I'd go to like square one and I'd be like, oh, okay, it's Asr time. What do I do? Like, do I go home? Do I take the bus home? Do I go to like this like dirty parking lot and like put my hoodie down and pray? Like, what do I do? So that's when it hit
Yeah.
me. I was like, okay, this is definitely going to be an asterisk when I'm kind of going about my day-to-day life. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, that's been our lives. I don't think I've ever had like I don't think I've ever had an opportunity where like I wasn't in that dirty parking lot and like praying because I had to make up my my prayer. So yeah, that's normal for us. I mean, maybe it wasn't normal for you, but for a lot of us living out here, it's very normal.
100%. I think Khalid and I have a few of those experiences together when we went shopping and
That's,
whatnot, but we won't get into that. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for sharing. The next thing we wanted to get into, and I think we've sort of hinted at this already, but in your experiences so far, whether it be school, university, professional career, what's been the most challenging part to navigate as sort of a young Muslim adult?
that's honestly difficult to pick like just one singular aspect that's difficult.
Hmm.
But like I think like if I were to choose one, I think it's like balancing the way religion was taught or usually is taught in a lot of like immigrant households. Like mine, for example, is you have parents who were raised in a certain Islamic society, and so Islam is it's very easy for it to be habitual, right? Like you not praying really isn't that big of an issue because everybody around you is pushing you to pray, and there's like two masjids in every street you're in, right? You're going to play soccer and you hear the event anyway, so it's like, oh, I have to go pray, right? So it's habitual. But the thing is, in this society, for example, there's a lot of like ideological questions that as kids growing up we have to ask that habitual practice doesn't really answer for you, right? Like when at least when I was in Saudi, and I'm sure Faizan, you can relate as well. We never had to question like, oh, why we're Muslims. We just are, because our parents are. But here, I find myself questioning. Like I had this phase where I was questioning myself a lot. Like, did I actually choose this, or like, am I only Muslim because my parents are Muslim, right? So you have to find like this sort of balance between, okay, I'm praying 5 times a day, but am I praying only because my parents are on my case, or what happens when I move out? Am I still gonna pray, or, you know? And so it's asking yourself like those deeper questions, like I said, as to why you are a Muslim in the first place. Generally in this society, in a lot of like Western societies, religion is questioned. It's so easy to frame it as like an oppressive framework or a burden, you know? Even as like a practicing Muslim, like Fajr still doesn't like I don't wake up excited for Fajr, it's hard in a lot of ways, So it's so easy for you to like slip into that mentality where it's like a chore, right? It's like a habit that you have to do because your parents made you do it or because you don't want to get sinned, for example, as opposed to actually wanting to do it because you miss communicating with Allah, for example. You
I have
miss it.
a
Yeah.
follow-up question for you. So you mentioned like the difference between like Middle East versus Western society, but then
Yeah.
you also went to an Islamic school in the Western sort of world. So do
Yeah.
you think those ideological sort of questions that you had were addressed in that Islamic school, or you don't have to name it, but
Oh, no,
or
not
do
at
you
all.
think they were kind of swept under the rug as like traditional like families do?
Yeah, no, Islamic school in general, in my opinion, it's not there to like answer your deeper ideological questions, right? It's there to enforce an Islamic environment where it minimizes like all the distractions from your religion, and it helps you practice, right? So kids who don't pray, for example, when they come to Islam, they're at least forced to pray once or twice a day, right?
Right.
So that's what Islamic school is made to accomplish. Like kids who don't read Quran with their parents, they'll at least read that in Islamic studies with, with a teacher. That's its purpose. But outside
Mhm.
of that classroom, you have to still sit down and choose to pray, right? You have to choose to read Quran. You have to choose to want to be a Muslim. Like the hijab thing, for example. Girls who wear it in Islamic school, and then when they step out, they say, okay, should I wear it or should I not? Like that entire ideological debate is something that a lot of teenagers have to go through every day, right? And I feel like the way we were taught religion doesn't really set you up for success in that aspect because you're always thinking like, oh, I have to do this because I don't want to get punished, or I have to do this because my parents, as opposed to like, oh, I want to do this because it means something to me, or I want to pray today because it'll fulfill me like spiritually, for example. So to answer your question, no, Islamic school didn't at all answer any ideological questions, but it did at least like mitigate and contain like the damage that would have happened had I had those same ideological questions in an environment like public school where I didn't have like Muslim friends per se, right? Because we see a lot of kids who go to public school, but they don't have Muslim friends, and then they end up going sideways, right? Or even kids who do have Muslim friends, but still end up going sideways because you're all going sideways, right? So it helped in that aspect.
Okay. What about you, Sia?
Yeah. I don't think I had much of a, yeah, I didn't have a similar experience because I think my family in general, growing up, weren't as practicing. So for me, trying to, I guess, find whether it was like Islam or like practicing, etc., it was a lot of the work that was done. It was just me and maybe my grandma who taught me a lot of things. So that was just a big component of it. And because I had to find it on my own, or I wasn't forced into practice, or I wasn't forced into certain things, I was more steadfast in my religion, in my spirituality. I think that was very, very important to me growing up. It even is to this day. The original question that you had was, what was the biggest challenge? That was that right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge was like comparing this Islam that was culturally embedded versus the Islam I had to learn. Right, those are two very different things. There were a lot of like, I want to say, problematic aspects of cultural Islam. I want to say that I had learned, and I that kind of pushed me away from it. Like it was the way people spoke about others who weren't as practicing, the how judgmental people were, how um, you know, it just didn't seem like something that I wanted to. Yeah, I don't know. It just at that point it didn't seem like something that I was so proud of, right? Because there were so many horrible people that were practicing their religion in a way to put others down, right? So that was something that really put me off. And it wasn't until like I learned Islam on my own, and through a lot of really great like professors, imams, like chaplains, etc., that I was able to really get into spirituality and like religion for myself. And loving the religion, for the sake of Allah and everything else like that. So yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges, was reconciling those two different things, and understanding that people are always going to be evil, but and hoping that doesn't take away from the overall, I guess, religion. And yeah, I think that was one of the biggest challenges when it comes to me as a Muslim. But of course, there were other challenges that I had gone through that wasn't sort of just about me as a Muslim, but rather me as like a young person, for example.
Right.
I think you brought
Mhm.
some like really good points actually, specifically regarding the cultural aspect of religion. Um,
Mhm.
I remember I was talking to about this topic with a friend a while back, about how like is it easier or better for you to be um, like is it easier to be a Muslim here or is it easier to be a Muslim back home? And they brought
Mhm.
up the exact same points. The only reason, one of the reasons that it is easier is because people shun you the minute you step out, right? The
Mhm.
minute you don't follow like that cultural norm. And that ties into my point where Islam becomes habitual. It's like you're only
Mhm.
being a Muslim because you don't want your, khala to talk something. Oh,
Yeah.
you don't want
No, you're
to
right.
want to screw up like I don't know your reputation in the community, as opposed to which is like extremely ironic,
Mhm.
religiously
Yeah.
speaking.
So the intention goes away.
Exactly, exactly. So you pray, but you get nothing out of it. It's like you don't even want to pray. You know for a fact that had people not cared, you wouldn't
Yeah.
care. You know,
Right.
and so sorry to cut you off, but just to finish my
No,
point.
no.
So
No,
people
no.
like
Sorry, continue. I was
okay.
just thinking.
So people with that same mentality come here and then, things go wrong because people here don't care as much, right? Like it's a free
Mhm.
society, you can do whatever you want. And so, like I
Mhm.
said, that entire parenting method, or like that method of teaching religion, doesn't set you up to succeed in the society.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I usually tell like my family members that too. I'm like, nothing good is ever going to come from force, right? If you force your children, you force your family members to do like that's not going to help anyone, right? The only thing that's going to make them do is maybe become sneakier, um, which I've seen. Uh, that's pretty much it. And yeah, and I appreciate like having the option to find um or like practicing religion simply out of the goodness of your own heart, right, rather than being forced to do it, like what you mentioned with the habitual practice.
What was it for you that prompted like that curiosity and wanting to understand or become more spiritual? Because you said your
um
family wasn't too practicing, right?
yeah. I mean, growing up I always heard stuff like, oh, if you don't do this, you're gonna go to hell. If you don't do this, you're
Yeah.
gonna go to hell. It's to the point where my my family would use that all the time, like, oh, you're gonna go to hell. And I was like, oh damn, like I'm doomed to like go to hell, like no matter what I do, right? So yeah, I think what did prompt me was, I don't know, I was just really depressed. I experienced a lot of childhood depression, and like just like the end of the world and like the end of life and death like always scared me. So it was kind of like there has to be something greater than us, like greater than this life, right? So it was simply that, like those experiences that brought me closer to Islam, that yeah, yeah. So that was basically it. Yeah, always thinking that I'm going to go to hell. Yeah.
That's, that's not a bad mindset, I suppose.
I
I
guess
mean,
maybe they're maybe what they said to me worked. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
yeah, I mean, for some it's the stick, for some it's the carrot, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And it's actually like maybe this for another time, but like it's very interesting, like considering what is the best way to like parent in this society, right?
Hmm.
You have to approach religion in such a different, you have to take a different approach. You can't just force your kids. You're absolutely right. I agree with you.
yeah. No, thank you guys for sharing. I think you guys hit upon the important point of like culture versus religion, because oftentimes those two things are sort of mixed together, and
Hmm.
you're not really learning what the raw form or what the pure form of religion is, because our religion, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people out there that will pray Fajr every single day, but they'll treat their family like crap, right? They'll be like the worst human beings, but they have all the check boxes done, like they'll fast in Ramadan and whatnot. And that's not what
Yeah,
our Islam teaches us, right? Islam teaches us to be like human beings, and us to be good human beings with good character, and also like worship. So I think that was very important, and so thank you guys for sharing. um I don't think I can add anything that's more fruitful than you guys have mentioned. I think for me, I hope that I can go through a point where I can solidify my intentions and use that as a method to continue strengthening my bond with my deen. But I think the max extent to where I've faced this is, as you mentioned earlier, in the professional environment, because sometimes you'll have to make a choice between going to a bar and giving up like a networking event where you might find your next job. Maybe it's your dream job, versus maybe saying no, or maybe not sitting at a table with alcohol, or maybe not consuming alcohol, depending on what your comfort level is, right? So that's something that I've been confronted with, and it's something that I'm pretty sure I'm going to be continue to be confronting for the foreseeable future. But I guess that's life. That's what life is, right? It's a bunch of struggles. But yeah.
You can take a drink one time.
Huh? She's not on camera, bro. We don't talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I think one of the other struggles that people do see is like just like figuring out like failures, right? Or one of the things that I was confronted was one of the things that I was confronted was confronting failures, right? Because in the back of my mind, it was always like, my immigrant parents didn't struggle for me to fail, right? They didn't like do so much for me to fail. And then that just made it even harder for me to use like failure as a way to learn, So yeah. I mean, but that doesn't have to do with like my Muslim identity. That has more to do with, my immigrant identity, of course. So yeah.
No, that's actually a very good point. That's, I know, Faizan, you were talking about this earlier as well. This is something that I wanted to talk. It wasn't like as deep of an issue, but like I think it's actually like pretty serious. Is like balancing guilt. It's like, for example, say you have come exam week. I wouldn't listen to music, right? No, I'm saying you just want.
No, I'm laughing because I relate to that, bro.
You just want to avoid like sitting as much as possible, or like you'll be like listening to music, for example, and then you want to make dua. Let's say like at nighttime, you got damn, bro, I prayed Dhuhr late today, or maybe I missed Fajr. I slept in, like I can't even make dua, and then like so that just balancing that guilt, or like that haram ratio, or whatever you want to call it, is such like a predicament, especially for myself. Like there's a lot of times I wanted to make dua, but I felt like I should have some shame and not ask. But that's like what you're not supposed to do at all, like in religion.
No.
You had to tell yourself like Allah is the most forgiving and He wants you to make dua and repent and so on. But the thing is with that is a lot of people tend to like overcorrect to both sides of the spectrum. So they'll either just become like too extreme in views and like, okay, no, I can't do anything at all. I can't, have social media. I can't listen to music at all. And then some people just say like, okay, well, I'm already sinning, so there's no hope for me. And they just stop trying altogether, right? Because they think they have too much like shame or maybe pride to like make dua or repent, So I think that's something that a lot of teenagers specifically, or like kids in our demographic, face.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that guilt comes from the way we were parented, or like the way we were raised, where of course, like I mentioned before, was that the first thing that would come to like us would be, oh, if you do this, Allah's gonna damn you to hell, like you don't tell that to a 5-year-old, like a 6-year-old. Come on,
Yes.
So a lot of that guilt comes from the way we were parented, and I don't blame our parents, because that's the generational struggle, right? Like that's what they learned from their parents, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. No, or like saying, oh, if you don't eat this grain of rice, it's gonna follow you on the day of judgment. Or you guys were told that before?
Wait, what was that?
If you don't eat this grain of rice, it's gonna come to your judgment. I'll be like, oh, why didn't you eat me?
Yeah.
Just the whole fear tactic, man.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. But it's like, what happens to, speaking of mercy and speaking of kindness and all of that, which is a lot more important and is repeated more throughout our religion than, words of damnation and, punishment and cruelty, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask you guys sort of an extension of the previous question. We talked we talked about grains of rice following you on the day of judgment, but we also talked about sort of our struggles. We sort of talked about our struggles with respect to, like our university, post-university, professional, and, even like deeper identity questions. How have you, or how are you currently sort of navigating those struggles, and what have you been doing to try to answer those questions, or being able to, being okay with some of the struggles that you're going through? And if you have any like advice for anyone listening who can potentially relate to it.
Oof. I don't know. Honestly, like for the ideological aspect, the only thing that can help you like really solve the problem, I feel like, is education. Like maybe read into your religion, rectify your ignorance on some topics. Maybe you just heard the wrong things from the wrong people, right? Or maybe all you need is someone to explain the same point, but like in a different perspective, you know? So educate yourself, go out there, seek those answers, surround yourself with people who embody Islam in the way that it's supposed to be embodied, right? Like you can't just be a practicing Muslim but like a terrible human being, you know? For example. So surround yourself with people who make you want to be a Muslim. Find friends who will remind you to pray when you're out at the mall, or friends who will, like, if you're planning a trip, for example, they'll make sure to locate masjids nearby, and kids who like force you to keep your priorities straight. That's how it worked for me with regards to the ideological perspective. And at the end of the day, like nobody can tell you why Islam works for you except you. You're gonna have to find that answer. There's so many reasons why people are Muslim, and there's so many ways of being religious, right? That speak to you personally, or maybe your struggle personally as well. You just have to find what suits you, right? So you have to go and seek that answer. With regards to like Salah and stuff, man, look, Fajr Salah still gets me. Like I've never woken up excited, and I don't know what would change that, but you don't always have to be excited for everything. It's okay to kind of just force that bit of like a structure, and then hope that, throughout that and throughout being religious in other ways, you'll find that spirituality you need to maybe make it like into something you want to do. Maybe that could work for you. But again, you have to find your thing,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, for sure. Like those are such important points. Whether it's, having those good friends around you, whether it's, rectifying your own ignorance. Yeah, like I agree with all of that. I think for me, it's always just, be unapologetically Muslim, like be that person. And I think, there's so much like embarrassment or like shame that some Muslims feel, but it's like, no, why are we trying so hard to fit into a society that has done so much harm to other minorities like us, whether it's like the exploitation of like indigenous people, of Black people, there's just so much more. Like, why are we striving so hard to be that model minority, right? We shouldn't. So be unapologetically Muslim, acknowledge your ignorance, be a better ally to other communities. What else? Like if you're not going to get a job because you weren't out drinking with a partner, like who cares? Like, do you really need that job? Like, that job is not for you. And once again, this dunya is so temporary, once again. And yeah, don't strive towards whiteness. Never. Anyways.
Yeah, that's
kind of what I had.
Point. It's like this society in general that we're in, like the trend that we're going in, like, it's not modeled around like a religious system, right? So if you try to pick and choose what parts of your religion will fit into that, you might end up giving too much up, right?
Yeah.
Hello? You might give up too much, or you might just lose your identity altogether. So just be you. Yeah.
Exactly. Salam, Ifrah.
Alaikum assalam. How are you?
We're going to take an intermission to welcome our fourth guest, Ifrah. Due to technical difficulty, she was unable to come a little bit earlier.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to apologize. I
All
was
good.
all over the place this morning.
No problem.
But honestly, when I was first told the topic, I was really interested in talking about this because I grew up in a Islamic country for 12 years of my life. I was born and raised in Dubai. So moving here at that age was so interesting because I was grown up just around knowing that like this is the norm, like hearing the azan 5 times a day, like having a mosque 5 kilometers apart from each other, like even the stores and malls would like close because they had to go pray. Like the men would literally close the store so they could walk to the nearest mosque. So that was the norm growing up. And I never thought much about it because it was just, the regular. And then I moved here, and the first thing I really, honestly, I was so shook was when we were ordering pizza at my aunt's house, and my cousin didn't let me get pepperoni on my pizza. I was just like, as a 13-year-old, I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I want this. He like explained to me the whole situation between like not everything you eat here is going to be halal. And I was so surprised. I was like, wait, nobody told me this before I agreed to moving here.
Have you guys also heard like the
Let's move back.
Yeah. Have you heard like the halal pepperoni excuse? They're like, oh no, they use the same oil, so like it splashes onto like the halal pepperoni.
Oh my God. Or they use the same knives or whatever.
Okay, no, but like it's true though. I worked.
Oh
Okay,
my God.
I'm sorry. I worked for like this was my first job. I worked at my dad's pizza place. My dad was really good, so he always separated everything. Like because he knew he was about it. But I knew other stores didn't really care, right? They did not, because they knew halal pepperoni would sell, so they would get it on stock. But that doesn't mean they would use different cutters or like different, cutters were the main things because technically you put it in an oven, so it doesn't really matter. But containers too, right? Like some of the cheese at Pizza isn't clean because they pack them together. They put the pepperoni on top. Actually, they put the pepperoni on top of the cheese. So
you just ruined everything for me.
I have to go and repent for so many pizzas now.
So yeah, anyways, that's why.
My first experience was like, no, like, there's no such thing. Like I can eat anything I want. And my mom was like, oh yeah, I should have told you this before, but you have to think about where you eat now. You
can't. Oh my gosh.
And then it's just like I had to download the Azan app, and I was like, what? Like, you're telling me I have to remind myself?
I love this.
So that's when I guess as a 13-year-old, I was like, wow, like this is actually my identity is I'm a Muslim first. And there it was like, I was just born around it. And so no one actually acknowledged it. And then I learned as I grew older, I was like, okay, well, now when I work, I have to carry myself as a Muslim because then I need other people to know what difference I am from like other people that are not Muslim.
Yeah.
So that was my first experience. And I still don't remember that. Like I remember my cousin saying, no, don't get the pepperoni. I was like, okay. But yeah, it's
what is this country?
But my only advice, honestly, is to just educate people that don't know. I was the first Muslim and also like person of color at where I used to work, and so like explaining to them why I can't just get the same lunch as them. And like why I'm fasting and why I'm not fasting the week I'm not, like explaining these things to them. It used to be a pain before, but my boss once asked me why like I couldn't get what they were ordering for lunch. And I told her, I was like, well, what you're ordering is not halal. And she was like, what does that mean? And for the first time, I just told her, I was like, not halal because the way you guys sacrifice, like I told her the whole jazz. And then the next time she actually asked, what would you like to order? And we got Shelby's that day for lunch. So,
Wow.
that's when I was like, I'm going to explain why, only because it's for my own comfort. I think your workplace wants you to be comfortable and be happy where you are. And so if everyone's having lunch that day for free, like, you should also be considered like a part of the team. And so what you eat, everyone should be able to eat it. So
Yeah.
when that happened, I was like, you know what, I'm going to start telling them why things are the way they are. So
Yeah, I think something you mentioned that Asiya mentioned that I think is very important that I fully haven't even embraced yet is like unapologetically being a Muslim. Because I won't lie, there's been some instances where I have to tell someone, oh, I gotta go to the washroom, where I have to like secretly go into like a dusty stairwell and like pray 3 rak'ah real quick before
Yeah.
going to like the networking event, right? So unfortunately, that's something that that's something I struggle with on a daily, and it is what it is. And I tell myself, I'm going to tell this person, I'm going to tell this person, but the washroom excuse just works, right? So, and
Just a headache, bro.
it is. No, what I wanted to say was, like, you guys mentioned education, and Ifra, I think, brilliantly highlighted the second part of education, which is not just educating yourself, but educating other people. Because educating yourself, I think, is going to help with your ideological identity, whereas educating others is going to help you sort of fit in with other people. Because believe it or not, most people are pretty accommodating. So like, like I first said, they'll order something that's halal, or they'll maybe order like veggie pizza on the side or whatever to make sure you don't feel left out or anything. And the only other thing I would add is you don't have to necessarily go to like a certain extreme of being like a Muslim, right? It's whatever you're comfortable with. And sometimes you're gonna be confronted with two scenarios where you just have to pick the lesser of two evils, right? So like, for instance, if we talked about the bar example, if that's not something you're comfortable with, then fine, that's completely okay. That's your personal comfort level. But in another instance, if you're going for like an interview, some people might be like, I don't want to shake a woman's hand, but other people will be completely fine with it, right? So you have to really like understand where your comfort level is and not judge other people for where their comfort level is, because you never know the context of what they're going through, and you never know what their lesser of two evil is, because for them it might have been like shaking someone's hand versus something grossly worse or like Islamically worse, but they chose that. Whereas for you, that would have been the worst possible scenario. So, and I've been in a situation where I have been judged, and I've been in a situation where I've done the judging. And when you're doing the judging, it's like like you really don't know the full story. So like, just mind your own business, give them support, be an ally, and like that's it.
I like that. Mind your own business. It's so true.
You know. But,
Why
yeah.
don't we know this? Why don't most Muslims know this? Like, that's good.
Tell that
Yeah.
to like all the extended family members.
Good. That's good. Honestly, I respect that.
Sorry, Ifra, you were about to say something. I cut you off.
No, I was just saying I agree. The whole mind your own business thing, that comes up a lot in even in family. I feel like you do your certain tradition, and then someone always has to be like, nope, that's not how you supposed to do it. And then you're like, oh, but that's how we do it here, and this is what we're okay with. And if we're all okay and we're still in our bounds of like what we want to do and we're allowed to do, I think it should be fine. So it's really just what you want and what you're okay with doing.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own journey when it comes to like deen, and it is what it is, right? But anyways, thank you so much for each of you taking the time out to be here. I think this was a really fruitful conversation, and I think each of you guys brought in a very unique perspective that I myself hadn't even considered, and I'm hoping that whoever's listening to this can relate to some, if not many of our struggles. So we're gonna end it off here, and thank you, and please share this on your social media and whatnot.